Hello and welcome to an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, January 11th. Hope everybody's having a day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. It is, in fact, Wednesday, January 11th here today. Got a lot on tap for you, a lot in store. Big day here in the world of sports. A lot of news. Never a dull moment with the New York Jets as we hear mixed reports about the firing of Mike LaFleur, and the Carlos Correa saga has finally ended. He is somehow back with the Minnesota Twins after going to the Giants, going to the Mets. Now he's back with the Twins after leaving and opting out of the Twins in the first place to start the offseason a little over 2 months ago. So it has been really a wild 2 months. We'll break it down. We'll get into Carlos Correa going to the Twins, what this means for the Mets, what this means for baseball, what this means for the Twins. Where do they go from here? A look at their roster. We'll also get into the Mike LaFleur reporting today. You hear from, a couple reports that he's fired, and in about 2 minutes later, you hear that it's not true and the reports are false. And since that point, it's kind of been a standstill where we haven't heard anything else since then. So we'll get into all those reports. We'll get into the news. I think we all kind of expect LaFleur to get fired. We all weren't surprised when the news came across. But now to hear that the news isn't true, or that at least the reporting isn't true, it kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit if it was true or not. It feels like the Arson Judge situation all over again. When John Heyman posted out the tweet that Arson Judge is headed into San Francisco, and an Arson Judge never even, he misspelled Arson Judge, and an Aaron Judge ended up coming back to the Yankees less than 24 hours later. So kind of a wild, sports are crazy. I mean, that's really all I could say. It's been a wild time in the world of sports when you look at the Correa news, when you look at the Mike LaFleur situation. A lot going on, especially here in the New York market. Knicks on tonight. Nets will have the night off again. Isles and the Rangers. Rangers big win last night against the Wild. 4-3 win. Really good win in a shootout. Panarin, man, he is unbelievable. Love what I'm seeing. What I saw last night out of Ranger team. Falling down early, coming back in the game. Was all good to see. They defeat the Wild, defeat the two former Rangers and Ryan Reeves and Zook. So they get the win there. Isles Rangers have the night off. As I mentioned, Knicks will host the Pacers tonight at the Garden. They'll look to get a win, pick up a win after a tough loss the other night against the Bucks. Knicks are struggling. They're kind of up and down, and that's really their way the season has been. They've been up and down. They're an average team. They have definitely some holes. They definitely have some good pieces to the roster, but a winnable game tonight against a Pacers team that is solid. But they're a good team. They're solid. 23-18. But a winnable game tonight at home, and you look to bounce back after a really tough loss. And the Knicks have blown a lot of games. I mean, they blew the game against the Bucks. They blew the game against the Bulls. They blew the game against the Mavericks. That game was historically bad. What was it, like 31 seconds left? They were up by 9 or something. Or it was some crazy number where teams were 0-3,000 something. It was wild. They've blown a lot of really bad games this year, and you wonder if that comes back to bite them late in the season. So a lot to get to today on the program. With all that being said, this is the Bubbs on Sports podcast, and let's get right into it. So the Carlos Correa situation, the entire offseason, it feels like this has been going on for the entire offseason because it kind of really has been, is finally over. It is finally officially over. We thought he signed with the Giants. That wasn't the case. Then he goes and signs with the Mets. That wasn't the case. We thought it was over then. And now it is officially over today as he officially put pen to paper. Twins made it official. He passed his physical. Whatever was going on, the Twins are okay with it. And he signs a 6-year, $200 million deal to return back to the Twins. The deal could reach $207 million if certain things are passed, incentives and all that stuff. If they come into play, depending on how Carlos Correa does, how much he plays, all that stuff. But it's finally over. The Carlos Correa news, saga, craziness is finally over. He starts with the Twins. Let me give you a timeline here. So on November 7th, he starts with the Twins. Opts out of the Twins deal. It was a 2-year deal, $72 million deal. He opts out of it. And we all kind of knew last offseason when he signed with the Twins, I think we all kind of expected for him to opt out of the deal after this year and look for a bigger move in the offseason, which he obviously ended up doing. I don't think any of us expected it to turn into 2 months worth of bouncing from the Giants, going from the Twins to the Giants to the Mets back to the Twins. I don't think anybody thought that was going to happen. If you did, you're basically a crystal ball because, you must be relying on a crystal ball because I don't think anybody saw that coming. So on November 7th, and this is why, it's January 10th is when he signed with the Twins, and today it officially became official. So it was about 2 months and 4 days of this craziness around Correa, and almost a month since he signed with the Mets. He signed with the Mets on December 21st, 4 days before Christmas. We were all calling it, as we know, it was an early Christmas present for Mets fans. It was 4 days prior to Christmas he signed with the Mets. It's almost been a month since then. I mean, if this thing waited out another week or so, this would have been, 10 more days. This thing would have been a month since the Mets signed him. It's been a long time, and there hasn't been much news either. It's kind of been a situation where there hasn't been much news, wasn't much communication between Correa, Boris, and the Mets, and this is kind of where we stand now. So November 7th, as I mentioned, opts out of his deal, $72.2 million, enters into free agency. Month later, December 13th, agrees to a massive 13-year deal, $350 million deal with the San Francisco Giants. That move right there, boom, is going to San Francisco. Giants missed out on Judge. Everybody was like, you know what? San Francisco still got a big-name player. Because if you remember, the Giants went into this offseason, and their goal was come out of it with either Judge. I don't know if Correa was really on their list, but when they missed out on Judge as he re-signed with the Yankees, I think everybody expected a big move from San Francisco. Turns out San Francisco, they signed Correa, but they let him go. They didn't really end up with any big moves off this offseason. They made a couple moves here and there, but for the team going into the offseason as the favorite to get Judge, as the possible team to go out and make some big moves, they didn't do any moves. They didn't make any of them. Who even knows how really close? They weren't even ended up never really being the final competition for the Yankees either, as the Yankees, as it was the Padres that offered Judge a $400 million deal. Judge went to Hal and said, Hal, give me this and I'll be back with the Yankees. And sure enough, that was obviously the case, as we all know. And then less than about 8 days later, so less than 2 weeks later, it was quick. It was a quick turnaround. You hear the news that, the press conference got postponed, and we were all wondering why. We were all kind of having, interest. It was interesting. And at first, when I heard the news come across that the press conference was postponed, I didn't think much of it. I remember, sitting there, I got the update on my phone. I didn't think much of it. I know a lot of people a lot of people started to analyze it, and then you hear a couple hours later, it was because of his physical. It didn't pass his physical. There was an issue there. And then you're like, okay, something's odd. So then later that night into the morning, you get up and boom, he's a New York Met. That's December 21st, agrees to a 12-year, $315 million deal. And all Met fans are going crazy. It's the same day Judge is named captain for the New York Yankees. And let me tell you this. I don't care what anybody says. If you're a Met fan, all right, fine, you're a Met fan. Mets, Yankees fans, as much as you might not say it, we have a little hatred for each other. We all do. I mean, the Jets and Giants fan, there's a little hatred there. When you share a city, there's always going to be hate. You can say whatever you want. Nets and Knicks fans, as much as Knicks fans might say we don't care about the Nets, there's some hatred there. Let's be honest here. Giants and Jets fans, same thing. Rangers and Isles fans, boy oh boy, we don't like each other, right? And I mean that with all, not saying you're getting in fights, but in terms of when you get into sports and stuff, Rangers and Isles don't like each other, and the fans can butt heads a little bit, right? We all know that. So let me just say this. The Mets are always going to be the little brother team in New York. That day when they signed Correa, Mets fans were celebrating. They were all pumped up. Everybody was making fun of the Yankees because it was the same day Judge is named captain. Everybody's like, oh, Mets run the town. They're the big story of the day, all that kind of stuff. But here you stand, less than a month, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, and you missed out on Correa. So I just wanted to say that first of all. But he signs with the Mets, and again, we're all kind of thinking this situation of, all right, the Mets get him. And again, I'm not a Met fan. Again, we all kind of have the little hatred for each other, Yankees and Mets fans. I like the deal. The Mets are a very good team, with or without Correa. They still are a solid team. But they bring in Correa, and at first you're all kind of thinking, okay, where is this going to go? What's the physical problem? All that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden the Mets had concerns with his physicals. And you're like, okay. One team, because again, when the San Francisco Giants, a lot of people thought they just got cold feet. Like they kind of went into the investment, they gave him a ton of money, and they were kind of like, you know what? 13 years, $350 million. We don't really know. Because at first, remember, there was some rumors that it was about a back injury that he had, which is something that he's suffered in the past. And then you heard that with the Mets, it was something with the ankle. And then to come to find out, it was the same thing San Francisco had problems with, which was the ankle injury that happened back, when he was in the minor leagues, and it was 8 years ago that happened. And my feeling on the Correa situation. I don't really get the big deal. Again, I understand you might want to add some extra language in the contract. But the bottom line is this is how I look at it. You can't sit here and tell me Correa next season or 2-3 years from now is just going to all of a sudden fall off and not be good, just because of an ankle injury that happened 8 years ago. So that's kind of the way I see it. But to continue on here, then you get, the continued, I think as this thing, and I've said this for a while now, as this Correa Met situation dragged out, the less and less likely it was that Correa returned to the Mets. Because again, Correa, because then it shows you the interest on both sides. Because clearly there wasn't much urgency. Clearly there wasn't. Because if there was a lot of urgency, it would have been something that was resolved. And I'll give credit where credit's due. Steve Cohen, when he wants to get something done, he gets it done. Let's just be honest. Edwin Diaz, a couple days after the season, boom, locked up. Steve Cohen, when he wants something done, he's going to get it done. DeGrom gone, that Friday night, boom, later that weekend, I think it was Sunday night, 2 days later, boom, Verlander a Met. Right? So that's why I kind of got that feeling of, as things dragged out longer, Correa and Boras started to kind of have the upper hand, and it seemed as if they really started apart. Because if Cohen was really all in on Correa and was really willing to just give him whatever he wants despite the ankle injury and didn't have a legitimate concern, he would have made this deal sooner, because that's something I will give credit to Steve Cohen, as I just mentioned. When he wants something done, he gets it done. He does. And that's why you got that feeling, too, about DeGrom. He didn't make a strong push at DeGrom. He quickly re-signed Edwin Diaz, didn't make a strong push at DeGrom. So that kind of shows you there. You can kind of tell when Cohen wants somebody or is feeling a little, iffy about it. I think that's, as it dragged on longer, you kind of got that feeling. And then on January 10th, which was yesterday, officially, deal gets done. Correa to the Twins. And it's a 6-year deal, $200 million, again, with some incentives and options and stuff that can all reach up to $270 million. So I filled it in a little bit. I added some detail. But that's been the last 2 months and 3 days for Carlos Correa since yesterday. That's been it. 2 months and 4 days for him from when he opted out with the Twins deal to now, to finally put pen to paper and sign a deal. And he's back with Minnesota. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say Minnesota's a World Series contender. They aren't. Their roster's not very good. When you look at their roster, you obviously bring back Correa, which is obviously, huge. You just have questions. Luis Ariz is good, very, very good. You like your outfield. It's interesting. They're a very interesting team. They're a very interesting team. Christian Vasquez at catcher, solid, not a terrible option there. Solid player, played for Red Sox last year, played for Houston as well. You add Correa back to the mix. The Twins are not very good. They aren't. So this is why I wonder with Correa how much of this was kind of a just getting closer to spring training. It's middle of January. This situation's still going on. Let me go back to Minnesota. Because you just kind of got that feeling again that I don't know. I don't really know. Does Correa really want to be with the Twins? He signed there he obviously opted out for a reason. He obviously wanted more money, but to now all of a sudden just go back, it's almost like, all the other teams didn't work, let me go back here. But the Twins are obviously okay with it. The Twins need him. The Twins, they're not very good with him or without him. But look, he's getting one of the best shortstops in baseball, and that's kind of been my opinion on this for a very long time now. I've kind of talked about this a lot. A lot of people disagree with me, which I understand why. I'm in the minority when I talk about this. I understand, look, it's almost like, if you go to buy a car, right, and it says, this car might stop working in 3 years. Are you going to probably buy that car? No. Same thing here with Correa. It's a similar situation with Correa where, okay, you can sign him. You're going to give him a ton of money. But there's a risk of 5 years from now him not being the same player and him having a really big injury risk. There's that risk, and that's why the Mets passed up on the deal. But I continue to say this. Mets needed a third baseman, right? And I want to try to word this the best way I can. This is a type of deal, in my opinion, where a lot of Mets fans right now could say, who cares? He's gone. We didn't, ankle injury, it's fine. Mets are actually, this is okay. We have Brett Beatty coming up. Eduardo Escobar's not a terrible option. A little inconsistent, but he's a guy that's, a little bit of power. Okay, fine. You have Beatty coming up the pipeline. Got some MLB experience last year. Obviously got hurt, but he could be a young prospect, promising. Can maybe fill that void very much, fill that void for the next, very long time. He can maybe be your future there, just to put it the basic way. So you can look at it that way. And a lot of Met fans feel that. But I think this is the type of deal where we're going to really find out how this all plays out within the next couple years. Because right now you could say, the Mets are big losers. They missed out on Correa. They should have signed him. But you could also look at it and say, Mets still have a lot of talent. And do they really they need a third baseman, but is Correa going to make or break their, it's not like Correa is their only star. Is Correa going to really make or break their team? They still have a ton of talent. It's not like it's like unlike Judge with the Yankees, where if Judge didn't return to the Yankees probably don't even make the playoffs, right? So I think that's kind of where I'm getting at this, where it's like, how much is it? It does impact the Mets, but I do believe this is something where you're going to kind of get a gauge of how this deal ends up really playing out in the next 5 years. Let's say these next 5 years, the Mets' third base is a revolving door. They don't win much. They start struggling. And I'm not saying that the Twins are going to go on and be great. I don't think they'll win a World Series anytime soon. Their roster's not very good around Correa. But let's say they go out, Correa maybe wins an MVP within the next 5 years, plays really well, and you play the what-if game. That's the feeling I get. And that's what I've kind of talked about a lot with this Correa situation in general, is Carlos Correa, let's be honest here. If he would have, in 5 years, right, and we talked about this with the Judge deal, and I'm not trying to compare the two, it's a big difference, but the Judge deal we've talked about as Yankee fans, if the 9-year deal, $360 million, right, 360, 9 years, 360, right, we're okay with the final 3 years of that deal not being great. We're okay with that, because you're gonna get 6 really good years. The final 3 years now might be great. You hope within those 6 years you get a championship or two. I would love multiple, but let's start with one, right? We haven't won one since 2009. Let's just get 28, and then we can focus on the rest, right? But so you're okay with that. This Correa deal, it was a 12-year deal, $350 million. I want to ask this to Met fans. Would you really care as a Met fan if, let's say, in the next 6 years, Correa delivers 2 championships to the Mets and wins an MVP? Would Met fans really be worried about if he starts to struggle the 3 years left? Right? You just don't know. That's why I think that the Mets here missed out a little bit. I do. I see both sides of it, but it's just, I don't get the whole, I understand there's concerns around Correa. Everybody's saying, the back end of the contract might look ugly. You can say that about a ton of players. You could say that about almost every player in baseball when they sign a long-term deal that the final 3-4 years might look ugly, where they don't play well and they're really bad. You might say that. But if they can deliver in the first 6-7 years of the deal, if they can deliver a championship, if they can be a dominant player, you don't care what the final couple years are of the deal. And that's kind of the feeling I got from this Correa deal, where it's like Correa really could have, in a way, Correa could have put you over the top. I know I've said that, what I said earlier, I want to make clear. I don't think with Correa, I'm not saying that the Mets need him to win a championship, but I will tell you, if they had Correa, it probably would have put him over the top. They could still win without him. That's what I'm saying. But if they had him, they would be the favorites right now. Without him, third base is a question mark. Let's be honest. You could be sitting here as a Met fan and say, you got Brett Beatty. That's great. What have we seen out of Brett Beatty that makes you convinced that he's the future? He could be. He hasn't got much playing time. I get that. But what is made in Eduardo Escobar as well? He's inconsistent. A lot of Met fans couldn't stand him last year. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts there? So I don't know. The Mets, This whole feeling of, the final 5 years are going to be ugly. So what? Mets fans, you haven't won a championship since 86. The Mets as an organization haven't won since 86. You're trying to build a winner, right? I mean, who cares if in 6 years, if Correa gets you an MVP and wins you a championship, are you really going to be worried about, are you really going to be concerned about what he does in the final 4 or 5 years of the deal? Let's say he plays average and gets hurt. Let's say he plays average and maybe can't stay healthy the final 5 years. Are you really going to care if you win a championship or two in the front end of the deal, which you very possibly could have done with Correa, because you would have basically every position, every position would be set up then. Your outfield set with Nimmo, Cannon, and Marte. Your infield set with Lindor, Correa, McNeil, and Alonso. You love your rotation, and you have hopes about Alvarez being the future at catcher. So that's the feeling I get on this deal. I don't know what's going to happen with Correa. I really don't. I mean, I think Correa might get lost in Minnesota. I do. You didn't really hear much from him last year. Again, that's another thing, too. He's 28 years old. It's not like we're talking about giving a 35-year-old a 6-year deal with an injury history. This is something that happened 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And prove me wrong. If Correa goes out there this year and plays 30 games and can't stay healthy, then I'm wrong. But right now, what has Correa shown you? Everybody has injury concerns. Anybody. What has Correa shown you that makes you believe, he's going to just get hurt in the next 6 years? He has shown no signs of slowing down. He's still one of the best shortstops, one of the best players in the game. He hasn't re-injured that ankle since. Now, all of a sudden, it's an issue? So that's my feeling on it. But Correa goes to Minnesota, and the Mets miss out. And it will now be interesting to see how this affects the Mets. What happens with Correa. This is going to be interesting. This is something that's going to last, the next couple years. It is. You could sit here right now and say, we're better off without him. But in the next couple years, this is going to be really, if the Mets don't do anything these next 3-4 years, you're going to look back on this deal and say, especially if Correa's raking in Minnesota. And I'm not saying winning championships, but let's just say he's playing at a high level 3-4 years from now. He's still playing well. And let's just say, again, as I mentioned earlier, the Mets still haven't found third base. I will mention this. The one positive about this with the Mets is, it does give them the ability next season where they can go after Machado and they can go after Ohtani. It does give them that flexibility. It does. And maybe that's Steve Cohen's thought process here of, you know what, we're not going to take a risk on a guy that we might get 6 good years out of and 6 bad years. Instead, we're going to go look at a guy like Machado or Ohtani next season that you feel you're going to get the full contract out of him. And that's a possibility. And that, if the Mets go out next season and get Machado, you look back on this and say, who cares? Who cares? You bring in Machado, you're perfectly fine. So, again, this is a type of deal that I'm not going to, you can't sit here right now and say, Correa won or the Mets lost. You kind of have to wait and see. What did the Mets do offseason? Does not signing Correa mean they're going to make a strong push for Ohtani or Machado? Does not signing Correa mean that doesn't mean anything about Ohtani and Machado and that third base they're relying on Beatty? And for the Twins too, or from Correa's standpoint, is he able to stay healthy the next couple years, or is the reports true about the physical that he's not able to stay healthy and he's going to have issues? It will be interesting. It really will be. It will definitely be interesting to see how this all plays out. All right, so now we move on to a little football here, as the New York Jets wrapped up their season, obviously, on Sunday with a loss to the Miami Dolphins, 11-6, and fell to 1-7 since the bye week, fell to 7-10 on the year, lost 6 straight to end the year, didn't score a touchdown in 3 weeks. Just to give you some numbers, as I mentioned, they haven't won a game since 3 days after Thanksgiving was the last time the Jets won. The last time they scored a touchdown was a week before Christmas. So, a lot has happened. A lot has happened with the New York Jets over the past couple weeks. As a matter of fact, or over the past month here, Carlos Correa signed December 21st. That's crazy to think. December 21st he signed. Carlos Correa signed with the Mets after so Correa, to put it this way, the last time the Jets scored a touchdown, Correa was not with the Mets yet. To put it into perspective, because this Correa thing feels like forever. Actually, The Yankees, not the Yankees. The last time the Jets scored a touchdown was, December 18th? It was a week before Christmas. Yep, December 18th. And then 3 days later is when Correa signed with the Mets. So, kind of crazy. It's really crazy to think about that. That Correa signed with the Mets 3 days after the last time the Jets scored a touchdown. So, these last couple weeks of Correa seems like forever ago, but the Jets scoring a touchdown is even longer than that. Just to put that in perspective. So anyway, it's wild. So with the Jets offseason ending, we've already seen some coaches across football get fired. Cliff Kingsbury got fired. Lovie Smith got fired. You saw the Browns fire their defensive coordinator. So there's definitely been some moves so far. And you expect to see some more moves with head coaches and stuff, and obviously hirings, and you hear names like Harbaugh and Sean Payton pop up for some of the early jobs, such as Denver and Carolina and Arizona today. You hear the rumors about Payton. If I had to guess, Sean Payton probably will go to Denver with an established quarterback there and a team that clearly needs a coach. I think they will probably go out and go out there and probably bring in they'll probably go and bring in Sean Payton, but we'll see. So, anyway, we saw this similar situation with Judge a couple months ago, where Judge signs with the Giants, Arson Judge signs with the Giants, or it appears Arson Judge, meaning Aaron Judge, is going to the Giants, reported by John Heyman. Sure enough, that's not true. And then today, you see two different reports. So, Aaron Wilson, who covers the Texans in the NFL, he tweeted out today, Jets parting ways with offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur, according to league sources. He ran the offense the past 2 seasons after previous stint as the 49ers passing game coordinator. So, and look, I've mentioned this a lot. LaFleur, I think, has got to be fired. I think they've got to add a veteran to the staff. Saleh mentioned it. A couple other guys have mentioned it. Whether it's Frank Wright, whether it's Gary Kubiak, his name's popped up if he wants to come back and coach for football. There's definitely got to be a veteran, whether it's an assistant or a new offensive coordinator, to this staff. There's too much young, inexperienced coaches on this offensive staff. For, let's be honest here, a offensive side of the ball that was rolling with a second-year quarterback and an offensive side of the ball that's got a lot of young talent. You need veterans that can develop this offense and turn this offense to a legit caliber NFL offense. So that happened 11:37 a.m. was what Eastern was when that tweet was sent. 5 minutes later, 11:42 a.m., Connor Hughes tweeted, does a great job at SNY along with many other beat reporters. Mike LaFleur has not been fired, sources tell SNY. So 5 minutes, similar to the Arson Judge situation, where Arson Judge, as we all know, Aaron Judge, was headed to the Giants. You hear 3-4 minutes later that it wasn't true. The next day, Judge signs with the Yankees. Similar situation, a little different, but it gives you that same vibe. To start the offseason, LaFleur has been fired, and now he's not fired. So what's the deal? We haven't heard anything since. All we heard was, the last thing we heard was he has not been fired. It will be interesting to see how this all ends up unfolding. If this is true, if the original report was true, it would be interesting. I mean, I'll tell you this. I was not surprised when I heard the news that he was fired. That's one thing I will say. You know, if somebody said Saleh was fired, then and then it came back false, I would have believed that it was false. This, I just don't know if it could be false, because the Jets have kind of talked about, and Saleh said too, and I've said this entire year, Saleh the last 2 days, Sunday and Monday, made it very clear that the offensive staff needs some help. There needs to be a veteran assistant. He said the same thing too. He said the same thing as well in his post-game press conference. You know, they got to go through their process. They'll figure everything out. He was non-committal to Mike LaFleur. The bottom line is this. When you lose 6 straight games, somebody's got to pay the price. Somebody has to pay the price. Whether it's LaFleur, whether it's somebody else, somebody has to pay the price. So as much as, again, I don't want a guy to lose his job, but you feel as if something has to change. LaFleur's got to be fired. The offense was terrible this season. It was brutal. And again, I don't like the excuse. Again, you can give him a quarterback, see what he can do. I understand all that. But there's plenty of times where backup quarterbacks come in and, play well. You don't hear the Niners having excuses. They've done a good job with Brock Purdy. And I understand the Jets quarterback, but it's also a lot of questionable play calling. Many questionable play calls this season. And LaFleur said that on Thursday. Somebody has to pay. You can't lose 6 straight games, go 1-7 since the bye week, be 6-3, then 7-4, and finish 7-10 out of the playoffs and expect to keep the same exact staff as you had last season. You just can't do it, especially when offense was your weakest link of the team. Jets this season, offensive rankings, total 25th, run 15 or run 25, pass 15, scoring 29th in the NFL. The Jets were the 25th overall offense in the NFL. That's not going to cut it in this league. And I've said this for the longest time now. The Jets, I am sick and tired every year of the Jets having a bottom 10, bottom 5, even at times under Gaze, a league worst offense in football. Every year, the offense is an issue. Last season, the defense was awful. This year, the offense was awful. And let's be honest, last year the offense wasn't great either. It wasn't very good. Couple moments this year, you look back at LaFleur's play calling. Even that Miami game. Ran the ball a couple times on 1st and 2nd down. There was a 3rd and 14 in the red zone where he ran it up the middle. Game means nothing, take a chance. We all go back to that Vikings game. Sometimes he tries to be too fancy. I'm so tired of the Mike LaFleur play calls where it'll be like a 3rd down and 8, and they'll throw it 6 yards, and you fall 2 yards short of the marker. Seriously, that's what we're doing. A lot of times too conservative, not willing to take chances. Clearly doesn't trust the quarterbacks who are out there. They've got to bring in a veteran to the staff. This offensive staff right now is afloat. I mean, they're just kind of floating their way through the season. No rhyme or reason. They're kind of just calling plays and seeing what happens. So, 2 reports have come out. I don't know what to believe. I mean, we haven't heard anything since. But I will tell you this. If this isn't true, the Jets better have something up their sleeve. They've got to bring in a veteran. Especially, and they've said this a lot, and I know they're not going to stand up there in front of the podium and say that Zach Wilson's not our guy. But it seems as if all signs are pointing to Zach Wilson's coming back. If you want any way to try to turn Zach Wilson into something, or try and at least develop him and make him better and fix his mistakes, LaFleur and this rookie staff and Calabrese as a quarterback's coach is not gonna be able to do it. You're going to have to bring in somebody else. Veteran. Frank Reich, Gary Kubiak, somebody like that. Knows this offense, developed quarterbacks before, has a history. We'll see. So an interesting situation with the New York Jets. Truly never a dull moment with this Jet team as you hear the rumors about Mike LaFleur, and is he fired? Is he not? What's happening? We will see how all this plays out. All right, so now to close things out here for the day. By the way, that national championship game was awful. That national championship game was not good. A massive, massive win by Georgia. I did predict Georgia. I was hoping for a better game. 65-7 is ugly. 58-point win. Hey, got to give credit to Stetson Bennett, man. I mean, he is the underdog story. Georgia has gone 29-1 the last 2 years, back-to-back national champions. Georgia's really good. I mean, they're right now, they're the king of college football right now. They really are. And it's going to be up to a team like Bama or Ohio State or somebody like that to dethrone them. And TCU's run has come to an end as they fall flat against Georgia. So tonight you got 4 hockey games on. Flyers, Capitals, Maple Leafs, Predators, Oilers, Ducks, and the Sharks, Kings. In the NBA, you got a good amount of games on tonight. Wizards, Bulls, Timberwolves, Pistons, Bucks, Hawks, Celtics, Pelicans, Spurs, Grizzlies, Rockets, Kings, and the Suns, Nuggets. And the Knicks play the Pacers tonight at the Garden as they look to bounce back after a tough loss against the Bucks a couple days ago. As for college basketball tonight, got a good amount of games on. You got Arkansas, Bama, Miami, Boston College, Charleston, North Carolina, Wilmington, I think it is. You got Connecticut, UConn, Marquette, Xavier, Creighton, Duke, Pitt, Houston, South Florida, Texas A&M, Missouri, and you got TCU, Texas, which should be a good game, top 25 matchup there. Kentucky got crushed last night. Well, I mean, they only lost by They only lost by 3, but they were ugly first half. They had to climb back in the game, lose to a 7-8 South Carolina team at home, who's now 8-8. Fall to 1-3 in SEC play. There's now legitimate concerns about John Calipari. There really is. And if there's legitimate concerns. He's not adjusting to the modern game. His in-game management seriously questionable. There's reports that the players aren't buying into him. It's a mess right now in Kentucky. And the way they're going, they might not even get into the tournament. That's how bad things are right now. I mean, you've won 28 straight games at home. To lose a game to South Carolina, a rebuilding program at home, coming off, let's be honest here too, coming off of a bad loss either. They're coming off of a really, really, really bad loss in Alabama where they got crushed. This was a get-right game. This should have been a get-right game at home. You're at home against South Carolina. You're 1-2 in SEC play. Find a way, beat South Carolina, win the game you're supposed to win the game that you're favored by. Over 20.5 was the spread for yesterday. They end up losing by 3. So for those of you who bet them covering, you lost some money. For those of you who took plus 20.5 or 20, whatever it was, on South Carolina, you won some money. For those of you who had South Carolina winning outright, you won a good amount of money. You won a lot of money. That was a get-right game. And to blow the game the way Kentucky did, to lose that game, that's pathetic. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's unacceptable losing to South Carolina or a team like that on the road. Losing to them at home, that's even worse. And now you have to go into Tennessee, top 10 team in the nation, hostile environment, on the brink of 1-4 start in SEC play. And oh yeah, by the way, on the brink of falling to 10-7 to start the year. That's really bad. 5th-ranked team in the nation in Tennessee. This was an opportunity to get right, get your 11th win, get to 500 SEC play, and have a big game against Tennessee, an opportunity to go on the road. If you get a win there, you kind of take the bad taste of Alabama out of your mouth, and it's ugly. It's ugly. Kentucky is in jeopardy of losing 3 straight. They really are. They really are. So, really, really, really bad basketball right now from Kentucky. It gives you the COVID year vibes where they couldn't win it all, and dumb mistakes, turnovers, just really bad basketball. Not enough shooting from the perimeter. It's ugly. It really is. So luckily the Rangers won last night, and that helped me a little bit get over it. I mean, excellent win by the Rangers. Excellent win by the Rangers at home. Garden was going wild. Hank in the house. Henrik Lundqvist. There was a great shift there to get a goal. Rangers did a lot of good things last night. It was a really good win. So looking forward to seeing what they can do the rest of this year. And Nets will have the night off. They will be back in action tomorrow. Without KD, but they'll be back tomorrow against Boston for a big game in the Eastern Conference, and we shall see how that all plays out. So, as always, hope you enjoyed it. Football Friday coming up, a couple days. See you then, and as always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.